This is an interesting outline we have today. I like that you're citing WebMD as a source. That's going to be interesting.
Well, I don't, like, it's not like, none of this stuff is, like, official sources. Like, I just want to get a common definition to work upon.
WebMD is going to tell us that our sexuality is cancer. Because everything is cancer. That's like the trope, you know? Whenever you look something up on WebMD, they're like, oh, it's cancer, you're dying. That's a running joke. Don't give me that look. You're giving me a look like I'm crazy. That's a real thing.
I didn't think it was cancer. I mean, the trope was more so just like, you know, you Google something and then you freak out because it's something that you're going to die of, not necessarily cancer.
I thought cancer was the trope. I don't know. Maybe I have the trope wrong. I don't know. You're the younger one. You know all the hip stuff. You know all the tropes. Yeah. I don't. You probably don't even call them tropes anymore. I don't. I'm so old. I don't even know.
Yeah, I don't even know what you're talking about, dinosaur.
I'm so old. 25 of the quarter century. I'm so old.
That is weird. I don't want to think about that. The finiteness of time is the thing that gives me the most anxiety. One of my classes is about ideology formation, and this week we're talking about morals. And so I wanted to like talk about the moral system they use in The Good Place, which apparently is based on a book called What We Owe Each Other, among other, you know, many other philosophers. And the concept is like the moral system you should follow is, the idea is that to act morally is to abide by principles that no one could reasonably reject. You ought to design rules that couldn't be rejected by the people that you're having to share the world with. I'm Jen.
I'm Liz.
And we're Harmless Harlots.
What does that mean?
To us, it means being open to having more than one relationship, however you define it, as long as everyone gives fully informed, enthusiastic consent.
It's also an homage to our poly Bible, The Ethical Slut, which we recommend if you want to learn more.
We are enthusiasts, not experts, in this field, so if you want to learn and explore along with us, we give you our knowing, enthusiastic consent to come along.
It's a good show, The Good Place. Oh, speaking of shows, brief aside for another teeny tiny segment of Poly Productions. I watched The One on Netflix the other day. Yes, I did binge watch the whole thing in like 2 days because that's how I consume content. But so The One, there's going to be spoilers. So if you want to watch the show, skip ahead a little bit. But the plot of The One is that these two scientists figure out that, so the way I think it's ants find their mate or some other animal species is that they have specific genetic mutations. And if you have the same mutation, you're like attracted to each other and that's like your mate. So they figure out that this is a thing in humans as well, which I'm sure is entirely fabricated. I don't even know if it's true in ants, but that's the plot of the show. So the show is like, we figured out there's a genetic mutation, you send in your DNA, and we can tell you, you know, who your perfect match is. And at the very first episode, when they were explaining this concept scientifically, I was like, I could buy into this notion that like there's some genetic mutation that like predisposes you to be attracted to certain people. That I could buy into. But then when they were like, it's only one, I was like, why? Why is that a construct of this universe? Why does it have to be only one? And they never say anything about that the entire show until the last 5 minutes of the last episode, when throughout some of the other prior episodes, there had been a woman who had been matched with her perfect mate, but then the woman she'd been matched with, her brother, also was like super attracted to her and was like, I feel like I'm matched to you too. And she was like, no, that's not possible. And so then in the last 5 minutes of the last episode, they're like, hey, by the way, is it possible to be matched to more than one person? And the scientists were like, oh yeah, of course. Like there's no reason it would need to be one, but nobody wants to talk about that. So we just marketed it as like The One because that's the narrative everybody wants to hear. But like scientifically, yeah, of course, what in the science would necessitate there being only one person? And I was like, why was it only in the last 5 minutes? That should have been the plot of the whole show.
Well, is that like the end of the show or just like that?
Yeah,
season?
That was how it ended. That was like one of the last scenes they had in the show was they were like, yeah, of course there's no reason it needs to be just one person. Like That's the only narrative people want to hear. And that could have been a really good plot point for the entire show, but instead it was just this little offhanded, like, oh yeah, by the way, like, yeah, there's no reason you should only have one perfect match, but nobody wants to hear that narrative, so we don't market it that way. And it's like, ah!
See, it's more subtle that way, because it's not like, because if it was advertised, well, I mean, it's kind of meta, because it's like the name of the actual show is called The One, and like, it is true that society doesn't want to hear about polyamory, so they just slip it in there at the end as just a little nugget, and it's like, we lured them along, and then we sprung the trap.
I did appreciate that they at least touched on that, because when they were explaining the science, like, as you know, I'm a mathematician, I'm a very logically oriented person, and when they were explaining the science of, like, the premise of the show, I was like, I could buy into this genetic mutation thing, like, sure, but there's no reason in my mind there would only be one person with the same mutation as you. Like, why couldn't there be more than one person? Like, there's no biological reason multiple people couldn't have the same genetic mutation. Like, maybe it's statistically less likely, but there's no reason it couldn't happen. It wasn't until the very last episode that they were like, yeah, of course, there's no reason that couldn't happen. And I was like, yeah, yes. Slightly polyvalidating. They could have done more, but I get that it's not as mainstream. But I do like that at the end they slipped in that, like, yeah, no, polyamory is valid even in this universe we have fabricated.
The fake universe has spoken.
The fake universe has spoken. You can have more than one true love.
So wait, so you were saying it was like a brother and sister and they were both in love with the same person?
Yeah, so the woman was matched with another woman, and part of it was, I think, mildly a little homophobic the way they did it. I don't think they intended it that way, but it was a little, because the woman was matched with another woman, and part of her thing was she was like, I've dated a couple women in the past, but I've never really been into women before, so it's kind of odd that my perfect match is a woman, but like, yeah, okay, whatever. And so they get together, and then that woman's brother comes into the picture, and then the brother also falls in love with the woman, and the woman is clearly like kind of attracted to him too, but she's like, no, this is impossible, I'm already matched to your sister. But it's kind of implied that, like, oh, like, the reason she's, you know, the man was the true match. I don't know. That's it. Again, I don't think they did it that way, but some of the ways they did the dialogue, I felt like they were kind of trying to imply that, like, the woman's real true love was the man, but she had just, you know, also been matched with the woman on accident because that was the DNA that was in the system. Maybe that's not, I don't know, maybe I'm being overly critical because I'm always overly critiquing the world of being too heteronormative, but that's kind of how it felt. But yeah, so in the show, they tried to make it science-y too, where they were like, it's more likely that a brother-sister pair would have like the same genetic mutation, and so then they would have the same match in people. Although I think scientifically that also implies that the brother and sister would be matched to each other.
I guess, is the science that it's you have to have the same mutation, or it's like complementary mutations?
They said the same mutation. I think. I'd have to go back and watch the show again, but I think it was you have to have the same genetic mutation. But maybe you're right, and it was a complementary mutation or something, and so they wouldn't be matched. But I don't know. It was a very interesting show. I enjoyed it. I recommend watching it. It is mildly polyvalidating.
How many episodes are there?
I think it's 8 episodes, and they're all like half an hour, 45 minutes. So...
You know what that reminds me is? We watched one Black Mirror episode that was called Hang the DJ.
It gave me big Black Mirror vibes. That's why when I first started watching it, I was like, this is big Black Mirror vibes. I like it.
That led me on to 2 separate tangents of things I wanted to talk about, but one with the brother-sister, I guess, I don't know, it kind of reminded me, and I think I've talked about this before, but my polyamory, my limited, very limited, quasi-romantic polyamory experience has tended to be that I've been attracted to like couples. There was one my freshman year of college, and then one when I was in Barcelona.
There's actually, I just learned there's a term for that I didn't know, but you are called a unicorn when you want to be a third to a couple. And the reason I know this is the best reason.
You had never heard that before?
I had not. And the reason I learned it is the best reason, because Rudy Giuliani's daughter identifies as a unicorn, and rebellious children of Republicans are my absolute favorite. I stand them so hard because you know Rudy Giuliani is having a heart attack over his daughter identifying as anything other than a cisgendered heterosexual woman. Oh, and I love it. I love her just being like, I'm a unicorn. Yes, you queen. Yes, please give your father a heart attack. I love it. I'm here for it.
Okay, so the term unicorn. I'm very okay. Well, I don't know. I'm very curious that you'd never heard it before because it's a very common phrase. I don't know, in all the poly online stuff I've been doing, and it's kind of a touchy subject. So first, I've googled the definition, and okay, the term unicorn is used to describe a bisexual person. I'm assuming pansexual works as well, usually, though not always, female, who is willing to join an existing couple, often with the presumption that this person will date and become sexually involved with both members of that couple, and not demand anything or do anything which might cause problems or inconvenience to that couple.
Oh, interesting. So they're just there for sex?
The unicorn will be the girlfriend to the couple. The couple is usually considered a primary relationship, while the girlfriend will be a secondary partner to both. She, and they're using she because they said like unicorns tend to be female, isn't allowed to do anything with one member of the triad, always with both. The dyad, on the other hand, are allowed to date each other without the girlfriend. If the triad doesn't work, then the dyad will stay together and the girlfriend will leave. Okay, so, obviously none of these definitions are like hard set in stone.
Right.
And a lot of the problematicness is, have you heard the term unicorn hunters?
No.
Okay, well, so like with the existence of unicorns, things that get a lot of slack on social media will be what they call unicorn hunters, which is a couple that is looking for a unicorn. And
I see those on dating apps all the time.
Yeah, and so what's kind of problematic about it is that, like, especially how this is describing it, which is like, yeah, the unicorn is literally just to be used by the couple as they please, which does not sound great for me and has not been my experience. Like, I do not feel like I have been hunted because, like, it was usually just like I had a friend and then I met their partner and I was like, your partner is really cool. And then I was like, if they wanted to have a three-way, I mean, I wouldn't say no. So,
well, yeah, when you were kind of, I mean, you weren't really in a relationship with couples, but you were very close with couples. You did things with each of them individually too. Like, it's not like you only interacted with them when they were together. Like, you also had individual relationships with each member of that couple as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely more so that I did with the couple, but also just because, like, the couple was very rarely apart, whether I was with them or not. So, like, they were just very rarely apart.
Yeah. But it's not like you weren't allowed to hang out with one or the other, because that definition was like, you can only hang out with the couple when they're together, and that's not what you did.
Yeah, this definition that I found is, I don't know, sounds weird, and maybe that is what it means to be unicorn. But I mean, I don't know, because, like, there are such things as, like, triads, which I guess I don't know how you have to define that as that forms, but like less of a unicorn, because they talk about like the unicorn being like secondary. So it does sound A, kind of sexual, and B, like, this is just a person we're throwing in to spice things up. Whereas for me, it has more so been like, I have deep connections with these two people, and like as a throuple, we are great. So I guess I would not personally identify as a unicorn. If I do end up with a couple or, end up in a triad, I would be fine with that. But yeah, I don't know. Unicornism is a very touchy subject because, like, unicorn hunters will just get bashed all the time. But what I was going to say about being unicorn light, I don't know, but like kind of how I've tended to be attracted to couples before. And maybe this is just kind of my like of polyamory, and this is how it just happened to have been expressed. But I think when I'm in specifically like a triad, then I don't know, I think something that's unappealing to me about being with one partner is that when you're with someone, you're kind of a different version of yourself with every person you're with to some extent. And so if you're just with one person, I feel like you can kind of get in a rut of like being that one person to them. Whereas like, even if there's just one other person, so there's three of you, you have a relationship with person A, a relationship with person B, and then when all three of you are together, that can be a completely different dynamic. So I just think that when you have more than one partner, you are better able to either be more true to your authentic self, or just, grow more as a person. But anyway, speaking of pansexual, I wanted to readdress something we mentioned in the last episode about demisexuality, because I saw this thing on Facebook that said, stop saying everybody is a little bit demisexual, because demisexual is its own identity.
See, that's funny though. I think where that comes from is that, so like at work, when I've been educating people on different sexualities, whenever we've like gone through like, this is what it means to be pansexual and this is what it means to be bisexual, demisexual is always the identity where they're like, oh yeah, we understand that. Only being sexually attracted to someone after you form an emotional relationship, yeah, that conforms with our narrative of how love is supposed to work. Absolutely, we like demisexuals. So I think that's part of where that narrative comes from, of like, everyone's demisexual, which they're not, but molds well with the standard narrative is why a lot of people say that.
Yeah, so I mean, just to have kind of a common definition to go off of, according to WebMD, which Lizzie has already roasted me for using, but what it says is that demisexual people only, and only, I think is the important word here, feel sexually attracted to someone when they have an emotional bond with the person. They can be gay, straight, bi, pan, may have any gender. The prefix demi means half, which can refer to being halfway between sexual and asexual, which is something that I guess I hadn't realized.
Yeah, demisexual is on the asexual spectrum.
Yeah, so anyway, so I guess my first thing with, stop saying everybody is demi because, it's a real identity. It is true. It is one that I think I strongly identify with. But at the same time, I want to say everything is a spectrum. So, like, why can't everyone be on the spectrum, even just a little bit? And also, as someone who doesn't really believe in labels, like, I don't think there is one word that can qualify someone's, entire sexuality. I think we are comprised of percentages of different things that we have given identity labels to. So that's what I want to say about that. But I also think, I don't know, because maybe it just is because I am demisexual, so I think this is how everyone feels. But I imagine, maybe this isn't true, but I imagine that sexual feelings can grow as you become more, intimate with a person. But maybe that's just because I am demisexual, and I imagine that because I also, back for that revelation we had a couple episodes ago where Sexadon talked about how a problem with long-term pair bonding is that there's some theories that it can kick in your incest instinct, which is why you feel less romantically attracted to your partner many, many years down the road. Yeah, so I guess this is me here saying demi is a very valid identity. Again, everything is a spectrum, so, people who maybe even aren't wholly demi or any identity may be a little bit on the spectrum because labels are blunt tools for describing very complex
Labels
sexuality.
are a model. We've talked about this.
I just wanted to validate demi people. Not that you need me to validate you, but I want this to be a safe space for everyone. So there you have it. I guess speaking of safe spaces, Liz, you found our term for mononormativity.
I did. I found it. I'm trying to remember now how I found it. Do you remember when I messaged you how I had discovered this term? I think it was a Facebook post or something.
Probably.
I don't know. I've been on a rabbit hole of social media this week because I try not to put myself in an echo chamber, so I don't unfriend people when they post things that are frankly stupid. But recently, I don't know why, my few friends I have that post stupid things have been posting a lot of stupid things, and I just drive me crazy. So I've been getting into a lot of Facebook comment wars about how, like, Dr. Seuss wasn't canceled. Calm down, Jesus Christ. Anyway, but on one of these Facebook posts from my friends who do not post stupid things, there was something about, I wish I could find it. Did I send it to you, or did I just send you the word? Yeah, so it was one of my friends who is trans that posted a wonderful little thread about, and I don't know how to pronounce it because I've only read it, I haven't heard it spoken.
Amatonormative?
What's a motto with you?
Amatonormative.
I don't know.
Hakuna Amatonormative.
Hakuna Amatonormative. What a wonderful phrase. Anyway, but apparently, okay, so feminist academic Elizabeth Brake in her book Minimizing Marriage coined the term amatonormative as the assumptions that The assumptions that a central, exclusive, amorous relationship is normal for humans, in that it is a universally shared goal, and that such a relationship is normative in that it should be aimed at in preference to other relationship types. So when Jennifer and I have been struggling to be like, what is the word for not being open to polyamory and just being normative for monogamy, the word apparently coined by Elizabeth Brake is amatonormative. So I will try to incorporate that into my vocabulary from now on. But amatonormative is the official-ish term for monogonormative, which I think is what we've been saying up until this point. Apparently, amatonormative is also somewhat broader. When she coined it in her definition, it was definitely exclusive to like monogamy, but I think it has, in the vernacular, also been used to kind of describe more of what Sexist Dawn paints as like the standard relationship narrative, because this post is also saying that amatonormative refers to like you need to fall in love the right way with the right person, so it's also linked to heteronormativity. So it may be broader than just monogonormativity, but I think it's also a fair term for use.
Yeah. Well, especially if they say amorous. Yeah. And so, that's, against aromantic people. And also, saying that it's romantic is, saying it can't be platonic, which maybe I'm saying the same thing. But yeah, I mean, it does sound kind of like just like the very broad, normative relationship that people learn about, which is something, a term I've seen a lot on the Facebook is on the poly pages, is about the relationship escalator, which is, I'm guessing, a mononormativity, which is like you meet, you date, you marry, you get a house, you have kids, you blah, 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 and it's just kind of this escalator. And so the reason it's kind of a concept in polyamory is because kind of what you were talking about, it's like polyamory is much more designer relationships, do what you want. And there are a lot of people who's like, I don't want, also related to like solo polyamory. Like, I don't want one person forever. I don't want to get a house. I don't want to have kids. So the relationship escalator is a term that is used a lot in poly circles to describe, again, kind of a very normative expectation of relationships, that you're expected to get on the escalator and ride it to the top.
I had never heard that metaphor, but that's I have so many friends now that I'm post-college who are doing that relationship escalator thing where they get married and they buy a house and they have babies. And I mean, good for them. Like, they seem happy. And I mean, granted, social media is entirely fake and they could be miserable for all I know, but they seem happy. But it's not for me, at least not now. I mean, again, we've talked about this before. I could wake up anytime and be like, jokes, I'm monogamous and I want the traditional life. And maybe that'll happen. I don't know. I don't think it will. But right now, thinking about it, I'm just like, no, I wouldn't be fulfilled by that. I'm glad they are. I hope they are. I hope social media is not lying and they are truly fulfilled doing that standard life narrative. But I personally just wouldn't be. I have anxiety dreams about that. Like, I think I told you when we were kids, I had anxiety dreams about getting married. Like, I would be getting married and then like panic and be like, why am I getting married? I don't want to get married. And I would wake up feeling super anxious. And I had a dream one time about you getting married and I was super anxious because I was like, Jen, are you sure? Like, are you sure you want to get married? Like, I don't know. I think I've always not wanted the traditional lifestyle even before I realized it, because I think I shouldn't say, I don't want to generalize. I know other girls who like dream about getting married. That's like what they want. But when I dreamed about getting married, it was always nightmares and I had anxiety about it.
Well, so that's interesting because I think the whole marriage thing might be another identity that I just haven't explored yet. And therefore, similar to my past identities, have just assumed that I'm quote unquote normal, and will later discover that I'm not. But I also do not have a super, like, I never had a really big push to be like, I definitely want to get married. And like, that's a big, like, it's never been a big goal of mine. And I guess instead of where you're at and kind of like, I definitely do not want this, my current mindset, which maybe I will begin to examine, has been like, maybe, but not till I'm like at least 27.
Oh God, like, I'm gonna be 27 in 2 years, Jenny. That's so young. I don't want it until I'm at least like, mom and dad were 32 and 35, and like, I think 35 is like the youngest I would go.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. So, but kind of a twist, but something I also wanted to talk about was, I think it was in a reading I did for a class, but they talked about when people are, say, they're like not looking for anything long term, or like say, I don't really know what I'm looking for, something casual. And maybe this is just my pansexual, demisexual self, but that makes absolute no fucking sense to me. So, okay, so here's the thing. So I can get it. Like, I know you had your one summer romance where you were like, I'm going off to college and I don't want, to take anything with that. I know
it
that did not work well, but I can understand your motivations for that. I'm like, okay, I get that. And so maybe that just happens in a lot of people's lives at different points. But for me, my demi-pan self, it's like, if I'm with someone, then it means I probably really like them. And so I just don't get, like, either I like you and I want to spend time with you, or I don't, so I don't want to spend time with you. So it's like, this is just a temporary casual thing. It's like, well, if it's good, why would I want to end it? But I'm aware that this is not the full perspective, and I do want to discuss it, but this is where I'm starting from.
On the note of that story, so for the listeners who don't know the story, Lizzie has had very few times in her life when she was monogamous, but this was one of the few times. And when I graduated high school, I met a guy the summer before I went to college, and we're going to call him Luke. Luke was a lovely human. We got along well. But when I met Luke, I was like, Luke, I'm going off to college at the end of the summer, and when I go off to college, I do not want anything tying me back to this horrible, awful town. I hated the town that I graduated high school from, in part because, as we've talked about, I was abused while I was living there, so a lot of bad memories. I did not like that town, so I told Luke, I was like, you're a cool guy, and I'm down for, like, having fun this summer, but I am going to leave, and when I leave, I want to leave everything behind. I am starting over, so I am not taking you with me. And I don't think that's a reflection of, like, my relationship style, because I haven't done anything like that since. I think that's more a reflection of, at the time, I just wanted to leave that whole town behind me. Mm-hmm. But anyway, Luke agreed at the beginning of the summer, yes, you will go off to college at the end of the summer and we will not date anymore. That's fine. And then at the end of the summer, when I reinforced our initial agreement and was like, all right, I'm leaving, bye, he got super pissed at me and was like, but we've spent the whole summer together. And I was like, yeah, that was the deal, but like now I'm leaving. And he was like, but I thought we had a connection. And I'm like, we did. But as I said, I would like to leave everything behind, and I'm doing that now. And he yelled at me. He guilt tripped me for having taken me on dates. And he was like, I invested my time in you. I spent money on you. Oh, he was a dick. I cried. So he left me crying in a park, and I literally had to call a friend of mine and sob on his shoulder for an hour. He did apologize to me, to Luke's credit, like 2 years after he left me sobbing in the park. He like found me on Facebook and messaged me and was like, hey, I was kind of a dick. Sorry. And I was like, correct, you were a dick, but like we were kids and I get your feelings were hurt and I forgive you and we're chill now. So Luke is fine, but it was not a pleasant experience for either of us. I do get your point of like, yeah, I think now that I am an adult and I have the freedom to travel as much as I want, now I would not do a similar thing that I did with Luke, where if I have a connection with somebody, like, yeah, I'm gonna keep being connected to you, because why wouldn't I? The other thing I think that plays into that is back in the day when Luke was hanging around, I identified as monogamous. So like part of why I wanted to cut things off with Luke was because I wanted to find a partner in college. And I thought to do that, I needed to not have a pre-existing partner. So if at the time I had identified as polyamorous, maybe I wouldn't have cut things off with Luke. And maybe I would have said like, hey, this has been fun. I'm going to college, but like we can keep seeing each other. But like, I'm also going to see other people. Because like my main thing with wanting to cut things off with Luke was I was like, I want to be able to date in college. And I didn't think about how I could do that, even if I was still seeing Luke, because I was monogamous at the time. So you live, you learn, you grow, you get better.
I don't know. And I don't know. So when I was doing some Googling about, people who, just say not looking for anything serious or only looking for short-term casual, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that I read was that like this, a way to translate it, if someone says that, it's saying, I would have sex with you, but I'm not into you enough for something long-term. So I guess I could also get that if, you are just in a situation where it's like, I either, am emotionally unavailable or kind of have my emotional needs met. And so communicating, like I am just kind of looking for more of a sexual thing, which I can get. And kind of what I was getting at with the demisexuality thing is I think in reading Sex at Dawn, it has kind of helped me. And this is, I don't know how to say this in an unproblematic way, because if you're demi, that is great. Your identity is fine. But I think that part of the reason why I may have kind of suppressed maybe my less demi side is because of kind of, the amatonormative narrative of like you have to find one person and love them and be with them, and like sex is for the people you love. And so I think in kind of reading Sex at Dawn and its emphasis on like, how as we've discussed of just like radical ways to just reconceptualize sex and what it is, it's kind of helped me to be like, oh, like if you have sex with someone, like they don't have to be your one true love or someone you like, it doesn't have to be someone you share a deep emotional connection with. Like it can be, and that can be great and fulfilling, but it's like, it's not wrong if it isn't. Again, I have gone on a rant and completely lost my train of thought, but just kind of along the lines of like, I could see, and this is probably very much theoretical because I think it's very difficult to play it in the real world, but I could see if I was like, I don't know, kind of like in the situation I'm in now, where it's like, I may not be in the town I'm in a couple months, but I may move anywhere in the world. So I could see, going on a dating app and being like, very explicit, like, hey, I'm probably moving in a couple months, but if you want to bone, then like hit me up. Yes, that was not very linear in any sense, but yes.
I feel you. My brain's been all over the place because it's been such a week.
Not a transition at all, but I have a note here for when you said you got on Instagram and we're talking with another coworker about being poly.
Yeah. So I had a fun experience this week. I have a horrible problem with getting romantically involved with my coworkers, which I don't know. You spend a lot of time with your coworkers and you bond with them, and for me, like that just kind of naturally leads to talking about sex and things. And I don't think that's necessarily bad, but a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's going to get you into trouble one of these days," and it hasn't yet because I think I'm smart about it, and like I set boundaries and stuff. I did date a coworker, as I've mentioned, Sebastian, my one long-term adult monogamous relationship, was my coworker and still is my coworker. It's worked out fine for me, but people keep saying that I should be careful, and they might be right. I don't know. We'll find out. But anyway, I had a coworker who is a very attractive man, and there've been some vibes between us before, but he has a girlfriend and is monogamous. So I haven't, we haven't tried anything. It's just been kind of like lighthearted, flirty things here and there. But he messaged me on Instagram. We were actually having a conversation on Teams, which is our company-sponsored chat site. It was about something work-related. And then he Instagram messaged me, and I was like, oh, it's going to get spicy because we're going off the work chat. And he messaged me that basically he was on the cusp of breaking up with his girlfriend. And one of the things he said was, he was like, I'm so over relationships. And I was like, oh, buddy, have you come to the right place? Hello, let me give you Poly 101. It was just so funny because I think what he was vying for was, I think what he wanted was for me to just like sleep with him as a rebound type of thing, which I would also do. I mean, he's very attractive. But yeah, so he came to me like, I'm over relationships. And instead of me being like, yeah, let's bone it out, I was like, let me give you a TED talk on polyamory. And he was very thrown, but I enjoyed the conversation. So I literally, so he had never even heard the word polyamory, which blew my mind because I was like, usually people have at least heard the word and have some misconceptions, but we're starting from square one, which is kind of nice. It was just a blank slate. So yeah, I just described to him like the basic concepts of like, yeah, like there's really no reason that you need to have only one partner. Some people prefer having multiple partners. I currently have 2 partners, which that also blew his mind. Although, funnily enough, one of the things he was talking about was how part of why his relationship was ending was because the sex was drying up. And he was like, I just feel like I need sexual variety. And I'm like, yeah, no, humans were meant to have sexual variety. Like, that's part of why, like, I'm a big advocate.
Lizzie, you always get on me for saying should.
Yeah, you're right.
Humans were meant to have sexual variety.
Right. Evolution implies that humans as a species used to have sexual variety. And there are scientific supports for the positive health impacts of also having sexual variety. is what I will say. You're right. I shouldn't say should. You're correct. But anyway, so I told him that, and his mind was just blown. I was like, yeah, so like right now I have 2 partners, and that's really good for me because like one of my partners in particular has a lower sex drive. So like I would not be satiated by him as a singular partner. But with multiple partners, I get all of my needs met, even though we're not super compatible sexually. And his mind was just boggled. He was like, but how, but what? Also, we talked about in a prior episode, oftentimes people's first questions are about child rearing. That was his first thing too, where he was like, how do you raise kids? And I was like, that's of all the things to be worried about. It's so funny to me that that's where people's minds go. Because in my mind, polyamory, I would think is a better environment to raise kids because you have more parents. All of the couples I know that are monogamous couples with kids are exhausted all the time. And they're always talking about how grateful they are to have like, you know, extended family to help them watch their kids. And I'm like, polyamory is clearly a better way to raise kids. So it's really interesting to me that the first thing people go to when they learn about polyamory is like, but how do you raise children?
I am going to interject because when we last talked about this, I was like, I don't know. Apparently, most of the research about child rearing in polyamorous situations has been done by this person, Dr. Elizabeth Sheff, who has done a lot of research in the polyamory arena, and specifically with child rearing. And I think, I haven't read a lot of it because, again, I don't really want kids right now or for a very long time. But her thing is like, yeah, no, raising kids poly is totally fine. But that also reminded me, Leah and I recently watched Cheaper by the Dozen because when I was a kid, me and my best friend watched that movie all the fucking time. And Leah had never seen it, which is hilarious because she is one of 7 children. So she had a very large family. And so we watched it, and it holds up. It's a good movie. So we watched it, and at the end of it, you know, the whole concept was like, oh, they had been raising these kids, but then they wanted to like make career moves, but then that was bad for the kids. So then, you know, in the end, they like scaled back and focused more on their family. But just seeing that, you know, like having 12 kids, it's like, I do think that it is, again, I'm not going to say should, but I do think it is a very good model of child rearing to be much more communal. Like, I think it is a problem with America that we are very much individualistic, and I do think communal rearing is better. Like, you know, it's so funny when people say like attack on family values. It's like, hell yeah, I'm attacking the family.
Yeah,
I think the family is a flawed unit.
Yeah, I'm reading right now. So like 2 years ago, I got Dad a book for Christmas called The Book of Joy. And it was written by, I think, Douglas Abrams. But basically the way they wrote it was the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop Desmond Tutu met for just like a weekend, and during the weekend, but anyway, throughout the weekend, they just have conversations about various aspects of joy. And they just wrote this book based on those conversations. And it's really interesting. Dad never read it because apparently Dad doesn't like books, which I didn't realize when I bought it for him.
He's dyslexic.
I know. I didn't think about it, though, because he really likes religious figures. And it just seemed like a very Dad book. Maybe I'll get it for him as an audiobook or something. I don't know. Anyway, but Dad didn't read it, but I have been reading it. And one of the things they emphasize in it is that a lot of people, particularly in America, have very individualistic mindsets, and that leads to a lot of unhappiness. And often if you take your mind off yourself and start living in a more communal way and like for and with other people, you're a lot happier. And it's like, yeah, the way we've structured like the typical family unit in America is so individualistic and self-centered and very like, I love my kids more than anyone else's kids. And like, that's not a productive way to live for you or the world. Like one of the things they talk about, and this is, Dad's talked about this too in his studies of religion and love and stuff, is that a lot of people have this mindset of like, I love my kids more than other people. And like, I get that. I get where it comes from, but it's not productive. Like, it's not great. Like, your kids are definitely like your responsibility and you have to invest more time in them. But this whole mindset of like, I want my kids to have it better than other kids is like, that's not helpful to the world.
Maybe the reason I don't want kids is, we mentioned this in like previous episodes, but like I don't want to raise children by my own. I want to live in a commune. And that is I just think, okay, maybe I've said this before, but it's like, okay, this is another thing. I saw a thing where it was like, I think on a poly page where it's like, you can't tell other people how to parent their children. And it's like, That is objectively wrong. There are bad parents. There are bad parents. There are bad ways to parent children. Like, there are just objective facts. There are bad ways to parent children.
I can tell you, you suck, and I will.
But that's the mentality. That's the mentality where it's like, you know, the family unit is isolated and the parents are like essentially the owners of their children. And it's like, no, children are human beings. They are not owned. And so for me, it's just like, yeah, children should be raised in a commune because, like, here's my thing. So if you give two people and you let them be the masters of a child universe, they can fuck them up in a lot of ways. Whereas if it's like, oh, I have 20 parents, maybe the ones who I have genetic material directly from don't love me, but I can get it from other places. But yeah, anyway, did we ever get back to how the conversation ended with your coworker?
Oh, that was basically the end of it. Was I gave him a TED talk on polyamory, and he was like, "I never thought about this," and was a little thrown. But that was the conversation.
Well, I've uploaded my poly video, so if you want to send him the link to the video and be like, "Here's a 20-minute summary of why it's valid," you can do that. So without a good transition, I'm going to go to our book, Sex at Dawn, which I think we're going to finish it today because this is the last part, and I think we get to good old page 312. But so this last part is called Men Are From Africa, Women Are From Africa, which just reminds me of last year when we were filling out the census and I was at home, and I think this was before you came home, and they asked, you know, about like nationality, and we got into this argument for some reason. I don't remember why, but Billy was like, just put we're all South African because we're all from Africa anyway. So that was a big argument at home. This is a chapter that I thought was kind of interesting, but I was also a little disappointed with. So essentially they are talking about like sexual fluidity, and the human female's sexual behavior is typically far more malleable than the male's. Greater erotic plasticity leads most women to experience more variation in their sexuality than men typically do. And women's sexual behavior is far more responsive to social pressure. So essentially, if I'm being very broad, what I got from it is that all women are essentially pansexual, but the research seems to show that if men say they're straight, they tend to be straight. And if men say they're gay, they're probably gay. If they say they're bi, they're probably like, guys are what they say they are, but women are essentially turned on by anything is kind of what this chapter says. And their sexualities are much more conformed to like social pressures. So I thought that was interesting, but they didn't really give an evolutionary or even scientific like theory as to why that is.
Well,
the only thing
also,
I remember,
if this study was done on humans, can you ever really know if somebody is gay or straight? Like, a guy can live his whole life saying he's straight and only being attracted to women, but he could be lying, and you know, like
they did experiments where they put like electrodes on like their genitals and like looked at their eye dilation and like their pulse.
Right.
So like they showed them images, and like straight men only got turned on by seeing straight porn, and gay men only got turned on by seeing gay porn, but women were essentially turned on by anything. That's really
interesting to me, because in my experience, men are turned on by the blowing of the wind in a lot of cases. Not all men. Hashtag not all men, LOL. But that's interesting. Okay.
So I thought that was interesting, but I also, like, they didn't explain why that would be. And I don't remember if this was in the book or if I Googled it. One theory was like, oh, women need to be more malleable because they just need to go wherever the resources are in, like, you know, this patriarchal post-agricultural society we live in. So, like, maybe that, but the book doesn't really offer any good explanations. It basically just says, like, women tend to be much more sexually fluid than men. One thing I thought was really interesting was they talked about how like hormones do a lot in attraction, and they found that women's assessment of men as potential husband material shifted if they were on the pill. So one thing they were saying is like, if you're on the pill and then you get married and then you go off the pill, like you may have ended up with a guy who you're not actually attracted to because attraction changes depending on like your hormones. So I thought that was really interesting tidbit.
That's interesting, but also, I don't know. My first boyfriend when I graduated college, I was not on birth control when I graduated college, and I wanted to get on birth control, and he did not want me to get on birth control because he said it would change my hormones and I wouldn't be attracted to him. And I don't. I mean, maybe because of your research that's true, but I don't know. But yeah, he was afraid that me taking birth control was going to change my hormones and I wouldn't be attracted to him anymore. So he told me not to get on birth control, which in retrospect, I think was partially because he was trying to get me pregnant.
Okay.
But that's a whole other story.
Okay, that's fun.
Did I not tell you about... He told me that when he showed his mom a photo of me, his mom joked that he should knock me up so that I would have to stay with him. And I was like, that's a weird thing for your mom to say. Also a weird thing for you to tell me that your mom said. And then like a week later, we had a condom break, which I think was a genuine accident, but a lot of people were like, he might have poked holes. But we had a condom break, and then I was like, no big deal. I live above a pharmacy, so I was like, let's just run down and get Plan B. And he was like, or we could chance it. And I was like, excuse me, what? And he was like, well, we're both adults. We both have jobs. We could raise a kid. And I was like, or we could spend $20 and I could take a pill and we could not raise a kid. That seems like an obvious choice. What?
Yeah, no, that's concerning. Yeah, so that was an interesting factual tidbit they gave. This is mostly just a bullet list of interesting facts because it's just kind of the end of the book closing it out. But one other thing they said was cultures that don't interfere in the physical bonding between the mother and child or prohibit the expression of adolescent sexuality show far lower levels of violence both between individuals and between societies. And so this is a very precarious spot to be because like child abuse is real, like statutory rape is very real. But at the same time, like when I was 8 was when I like got into porn. So it's like children do have sexualities. And I'm not saying that children like should go out and start having sex, but like children should have sexualities. That's fine. That's normal. Acknowledge them. Do not shame them for that. And also just kind of in this frame of mind of completely reconceptualizing sex, like the ending statement of the book is like a lot of us take sex way too seriously. And like, is there a way in society right now to restructure that such that it's not such a serious thing? Probably not for a while, probably not at a large scale for a very long time. But again, just kind of the moral is like, there are other ways to reconceptualize sex. So yeah. So I'll just read a couple more quotes. Polyamorists have found a way to incorporate additional relationships into their lives without lying to one another and destroying their primary partnership. True. Maybe this means that improvising new familial configurations, perhaps it will require more community assistance for single mothers and their children, or maybe it just means we learn to adjust our expectations concerning sexual fidelity, but this we know. Vehement denial, inflexible religious or legislative dictate, and medieval stoning rituals in the desert have all proved powerless against our prehistoric predilections, aka being promiscuous. So, I mean, this last chapter of the book is essentially just restating everything it said, which is that being polyamorous is valid. It is a natural option. It is not necessarily the or only or the most natural option, but it is a completely valid option. And if this will be the most anti-amatonormative thing I'm going to say, but you know, a lot of people who instinctually say, oh, I could never do that. It's like, well, maybe you're right, but like there are a lot of societal forces at play that most of us are not aware of. So what we're just trying to do here is make you aware, fully informed consent. We want your relationship style to be fully informed and fully consensual. So yes.
Well, and one of the quotes we pulled from a prior episode that you posted that I really liked was something along the lines of, it's really difficult to untangle who you would have been without society and who you are. And I think a lot of people who are like, I could never, it's like, if you were raised in a different culture, like you probably could have. Like maybe you're right and you could never. Maybe you're right. But I think there's a lot of things that are rooted in us because of the society we grew up in. And if we had grown up in a society where polyamory was the norm, I think a lot of people probably could. And maybe there are some that wouldn't. Maybe there are some people that are truly, truly deep down monogamous, only one soulmate, only want one. That's cool. But I think if it was more normalized in society to have many partners, most people probably would. Just as nowadays, since monogamy is normalized, most people at least say they only have one partner, although in actuality, I think that rarely happens, but they at least say.
So that is the end of the book. We did it. We did this journey. I also remembered I saw a post on a Poly page that was like, I'm reading Sex of Dawn, and like the beginning, it sounds so sexist. And it reminded me of how kind of you reacted at the beginning of Liz, where you were like, this is just saying that like men want to have sex with women as like property. And I was like, yes, that's because in the opening chapters they're laying out the standard narrative, which is the argument that they're going to rebuke in the rest of the book. So if you do pick up the book,
I do remember when I was reading it out loud in the car to Jen on our trip, I was like cringing and I was like, I hate this. This is gross. And then I was like, oh, that's because they're talking about the way society currently is structured, which is gross and I hate.
So if you pick up the book, which I do highly recommend, then just keep in mind that in the first couple of chapters, they are not advocating for what they are like describing. They are saying this is what society currently thinks, and we are going to provide evidence as to why this is not, as to why there are alternatives to this. So.
Well, and I think it's not even that there are alternatives. The book writers are very conservative. Book writers, authors. I couldn't remember that word. Anyway, the authors are very conservative and do not even go as far to say these are alternatives. All they say is like, this is the current standard narrative. Most people assume it has always been the standard narrative. However, there is evidence that historically it was not the standard narrative, and there are other cultures in which it is also not currently the standard narrative. And that's like as far as they go. Like the book is not radical. It is just
I read it very
science.
Radically.
Like they're just like
radical, but yes, the book is very sciencey.
I know. Well, and I did too. Like I definitely, even though in the book they never say should, there are a lot of places where I'm like, that seems like enough evidence for me to argue that we should all be doing polyamory. But the authors would want us to caveat that they are very conservative in their points, and
we take full credit for all radicalness.
Are here to give us the science. Yes, we project the radicalness onto the book. It may or may not have actually been there, because the authors, I think, do, at least at the time they wrote the book, the authors did both identify as monogamous. So that'd be interesting to Google whether they do still now or not.
But anyway, so it was a really good book. I highly recommend it. Thanks for, making it all the way here if you did. I guess, I posted the video about introducing why polyamory is valid, which is very much based on Sex at Dawn and also The Ethical Slut. So check that out. I'm still writing in the blog, kind of. Check that out. So yeah.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Smash that like button.
Smash that like button, bro! Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast app.
If you really like us, like us, send this episode to a friend, family member, partner, your boss, anyone else in your social circle, the people you want to convert to polyamory. Start a conversation.
Feel free to send us any comments or questions over social media.
So, thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.